So this is interdisciplinary studies in my own words. It's the gathering of information. It's the careful analysis of information that we collect from the different branches of knowledge, such as humanities, arts, social sciences, natural sciences, etc. And in those branches of knowledge, there's many disciplines. And so when we carefully consider information from all those disciplines, we can arrive at a better understanding of a problem or a topic that we're considering. I'm going to get into some of these topics or these expressions that are here in the word bank. My first topic would be assumptions. I think that kind of speaks for itself. Assumptions. We never want to assume anything. Unfortunately, that's the human nature of people to just assume that something happens because of our beliefs or because of our stereotypes, and we assume that certain people are a certain way because that's what we've seen in the past, and it's a bad assumption. One of the topics that I like to talk about is common ground, and it's one of my favorites because I've used this a lot in the past, and I was able to see that in the readings here in the book. Common ground is basically establishing a foundation in which two people or more can agree on. So myself being from, for example, from the Northeast, I have a certain way of viewing things, but I've been able to establish a common ground with people from down south or people from other countries. That's important because once you establish a common ground, you're able to build upon that foundation and work together with that other person or with the other group of people to accomplish something greater. Regarding complexity, well, I believe a lot of the problems that we see in the world today are very complex. There's nothing easy about life. Is not easy. We are not easy as people. We're very complex beings. We have our own set beliefs, our own personalities. There's a lot of variables, so problems aren't easily solved. It's very complex, and it's very important to have this in mind. Contextualization, I'd like to speak to that too. So the way I would describe this is we need to put things in context. So, for example, we could say that John did not work hard today, so we assume, well, he's lazy. He's lazy. He didn't want to work today. Well, that's not true. What does the context say? Well, John is dealing with a serious health problem that we weren't aware of. So when we put those situations in that context, then that sheds a different light of understanding. Critical thinking. This is another important topic that I agree with because in today's world we tend to be very knee-jerk and impulsive, and we need to look at problems and analyze them critically, carefully, and this is a skill that I think everyone needs to develop, especially younger people, because a lot of the younger people are learning to deal with a lot of problems that I believe we didn't have to deal with when we were younger. So the world is a more complicated place. I would agree to that. So critical thinking is an important skill and one that is discussed here in interdisciplinary studies. The disciplinary bias. It's tunnel vision. Someone who has a strength in a certain field, a certain discipline, will look at that problem or will look at that topic under their perspective. They won't automatically think about looking at other points of views, and that's understandable because again we tend to view things with our own lenses. So that's disciplinary bias there when it comes to that topic. Empiricism. So we define that as knowledge derived from our perceptions. The way I would say it is, knowledge that cannot be disputed. Um, the sun will rise tomorrow. That's not a belief. It's fact. The sun will set later on. That also is not a belief. It's a fact. There are so many things that are undisputable. So empirical information, empirical data is just like that. It's information that we all can agree on. Integrative thinking. This is an important skill. Not all of us have this, but it's one that I hope to personally develop. How do we use the information that we gather from interdisciplinary studies and put it together? How do we put that puzzle together to make that picture? Or how do we put the different pieces together to make the machine work? And so that's integrative thinking. It's a good skill to have, an important skill to have, and one that I hope to be able to develop further on. I'll speak to metacognition. Well, I'll cite Rene Descartes, the philosopher. He said, "I think, therefore I am." And those are simple words. It's a simple phrase, but there's a lot of depth to that. And I feel that we need to do a better job of analyzing the way we think, thinking about how we think. I know we all think, but sometimes we don't think like we should. So developing that skill will be very critical moving forward. Personal biases, well, I think that's self-explanatory, but so we all have our biases, our development, our surroundings, our parents, our friends, they've all had a part in our development and the way we see things, the way we view the world. So we tend to have our biases. It's not necessarily because we want to discriminate against other people's beliefs, but it's just the way we tend to react. So whenever we look at a topic, we want to avoid that. We want to be very careful to not allow personal bias to be injected into our analysis, because that could skew the understanding of the topic that we're trying to investigate. And Professor Klimek, all I could say is that I've learned to view things a lot differently after taking this class. And I'll admit that I need to go back and study this book a little further, and not only this book, but just the whole concept of interdisciplinary studies. It's very important, and I think that this course should be offered to students who are starting college. It should be offered in the first or second year, no later than that. This is a course that I came about towards the end of my career here at Coker, but I hope to continue to study this on my own, and I appreciate very much being part of this class.